We'll begin to call the meeting to order, please. If you would, let's stand for our invocation and pledge allegiance. Our Heavenly Father, I want to thank you, Lord, for this day. Thank you, Lord, for allowing us to gather freely, Lord, to discuss the business of the county. Be with this board. Help us, Lord, to make the best decisions for the people and the citizens of Pickens County. Be with our local, state, and federal leaders. Be with our nation's soldiers that are defending our freedoms. Father, go with us throughout the rest of this day and the rest of this week. And all these many favors and things we ask in thy Son's name, I do pray, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we get started, I think Phil Lander would like to address.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Chambers and I have had a chance to discuss matters before, and what I'm about to ask is by consent. Correct me if I'm wrong. I want to talk about two things before we got started. One, while we're here, and then the second thing is some agreements that we have made upon what will be part of our record. As some of you know, we heard this case a few months ago, or a year ago, actually in June. And it was appealed to the Superior Court. The Superior Court has basically remanded that back to this board for a new consideration. Nothing that you heard in the last hearing should have any bearing on what you decide today. This is a brand new hearing with brand new evidence. If one side or the other reintroduces evidence that they introduced at that first hearing, then it's something you heard today and it should be considered. But this is a new record. You are not bound by your prior decision in any way whatsoever. And just approach this without any bias or any holdover from that last hearing, please. The other thing I would like to go ahead and get out of the way is to make a motion to put into the record basically the board package that y'all received today, or received earlier that you have today, together with the letter from David Shouse that was just submitted today that you've all gotten a copy of, and Ms. Chambers has as well. Ms. Chambers and I have talked. This contains information that she wants it to be part of the record as well as us, together with the video recording of the hearing to be made a part of the record. So if one side does choose to appeal this, that will be what the Superior Court judge reviews. She will have the benefit of the videotape together with the record that you're looking at. Is that accurate with you?
Perfect, thank you.
Great. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my preliminary remarks. If you'd like me to go forward, we're ready.
That's fine.
Okay. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your service today. To begin with, I know this is not a very high-paying job by any stretch of the imagination, but it's an important job, and it's very important in this context. We're dealing with property rights and the context within how someone can use those property rights, both relative to their ownership and relative to being a part of the community as a whole. You are sitting as a Board of Appeals, which means that you are here to determine whether or not a variance should be granted. As you will find out, the Planning Committee or the Land Development Office has denied a variance request made by Ms. Chambers. That request is basically to use the buffer area on the backside of her lot. That is the portion of her lot that abuts a residential piece of property. And you'll hear testimony that will show that when we have those two different land use classifications, there's an increased buffer of 40 feet that it should exist between the two properties. Ms. Chambers has asked that be reduced to 15 feet in her application, and I'll let her talk more about the specific design and that. There may be questions that I will raise afterward to determine how the 15 feet will be used if her variance is granted and the building that she wants to build within that area is actually built, or ordinances currently prohibit the buffer area from being used for parking or any other type of use. As I said, the Planning Commission has, or not the Planning Commission, but the Land Development Office has refused to grant the variance. That's why she has appealed it to you. And we will have Bethany Brown, who is our acting head of the Land Development Office, to explain the reasoning behind that, but also to go through what your role in this is. And as you're probably aware, and it's certainly part of your record, there are 4 provisions that apply to the Board of Appeals. The first one is jurisdictional. You must find that this property is unique in circumstances, and we will go into that definition more extensively before you have the opportunity to grant any kind of a variance. It doesn't matter what the variance is, but you must first reach that jurisdictional boundary before you can get into that consideration. And if you do think that you have the jurisdiction to grant this variance, then you must determine, is this variance the least intrusive way that you can establish that will provide for the legal use of this property? We would argue that the property is being used legally now in the form of a commercial venture. We would also argue that this property is not unique from the other properties that are commercially zoned contiguous to this property and in this area, and you will see the tax map to show you that, to back that up. With that being the case, I'd like to call my first witness, which would be the Acting Director of Land Development, Ms. Brown. If it's okay with everybody, we'll just let her sit there. Can everybody hear me all right? Sometimes my voice does not carry that well, so if not, please let me know, especially you, Bart, since you're on the end. In fact, I'll just stand over here, so maybe it will carry a little easier. Ms. Brown, if you would, please state your name and occupation.
Bethany Brown, Acting Director of Planning and Development.
I'm sorry, first, will you please raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this action is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Now would you please state your name and your current occupation?
Bethany Brown, Acting Director, Pickens County Planning and Development.
What are your responsibilities in the Land Development Office relative to this hearing?
To issue building permits.
In doing so, are you required to enforce what our code of ordinances requires regarding buffers?
Yes.
And what are the purpose of buffers?
Buffers are used to lessen or moderate the impact of someone using their land when it is contiguous to you. We have zoning in our county because local government, through its constituents, decided that it was in the best interest of the citizens to group like or similar uses of land together in the classifications. Buffers within the same land use classification relate characteristics, assumptions of how the land will be used within that classification. For example, buffers in residential classifications are going to be larger than those in industrial or commercial classifications because of the increased desire for privacy, peace, and quiet at home, where these desires may not be as necessary or practical where business is being conducted. One of the problems, which is illustrated by this case, is when different land use classifications abut each other. In those situations, the general assumptions made for, say, residential, do not apply to the general assumptions made for commercial. To address this issue, the local government decided to require additional buffer requirements for commercial properties when they abut residential properties.
What does our code, specifically 38-856, state about buffers in commercial districts when they abut residential property?
If the proposed commercial development adjoins residential property, appropriate buffers shall be erected to protect the enjoyment of the residential property.
And this is found in Article 11 entitled Commercial Development Standards, correct?
Yes.
And what does our code, again, specifically 38-850, state about the reason why the county enacted this section of the Commercial Development Standards?
The purpose of this section is to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare by establishing minimum development standards for commercial property.
When can these additional buffer requirements be modified?
When the Board of Appeals says they can, by granting a variance.
And has a variance from these buffer requirements been applied for?
Yes.
What requirements must be satisfied before the Board of Appeals can grant a variance?
There must be unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same vicinity or use district, and such conditions are not the result of the owner's or occupant's own actions. Such conditions may include topography, unique natural conditions, surroundings of the subject property, or the size or peculiar shape of the lot. This is a jurisdictional requirement. If the board does not find that unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances exist, then the board does not have the jurisdiction to grant the variance, regardless of what the variance application actually requests. If the board does find that unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances exist, then it must further determine that this unusual circumstance places an unnecessary hardship or practical difficulty in enforcing the existing buffer requirements of our code. If these first two jurisdictional requirements are met, then the board must further determine that if the variance is granted, then it will not be materially detrimental to the public welfare or injurious to property in the vicinity or district on which the property is located, and the variance will be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the provisions of the code. If this requirement is satisfied, then the board must determine if the requested variance is the minimum variance that will make it possible for the legal use of the land.
What is the variance requested in this case?
The applicant's property is zoned highway business. It is contiguous to property zoned rural residential. When those two land use classifications or zoning classifications are contiguous, our commissioners have determined that a buffer of 40 feet is the best interest of its constituents. The front of the applicant's property borders the public road. The back of the applicant's property borders property zoned rural residential. The applicant currently uses a commercial building located towards the front of the property, and she now wants to build another commercial building within the required buffer along the residential property. It would be the 15, let me get this up, hang on one second.
What I'd like you to do now, if you would, go through these representations from the tax map that you compiled.
Okay. These are pictures from 2015.
So these are aerial?
These are aerial photos, yes, these are
of
historical
the
photos.
Of the applicant's property?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
This is how it's changed from 15 to 2018. Here is 2021.
So wait just, well, right there, on either of those, so that blue line right there where Mr. Cagle's pointing, that's the back line of her property, correct?
Yes, sir.
That's the line that abuts the residential
Yes, sir.
property?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Can you go back to 15, please?
Yes, sir.
Okay, go forward. So,
And so, going back to my question about that blue line, so effectively there is no buffer being observed at this point?
Yes, sir, that would be correct.
Okay.
Question. In some parts of the county, the aerial photography overlays are not accurate. Are they accurate in this particular part of the county?
In your opinion,
As far as we know,
have y'all
yes, sir.
verified it to the best of your knowledge that it
Yes,
is
sir.
accurate?
This is the 15-foot buffer along the rear property line.
So, let me interrupt you again. This red rectangle that Mr. Cagle is pointing to there, is that an attempt to establish, to superimpose the boundaries of the building that her application describes?
Yes, sir, this would show the 15-foot buffer off the back property line.
Okay.
This would be a 40-foot buffer off the back property line.
And that's what
And that's in the red rest.
That's what our ordinance would normally require?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, in your opinion, based on your study, based upon your review of the tax map and the pictures and the application, does this property have unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances?
No, it is almost identical in topography, shape, and size with the other commercial property in the area.
Now, do we have a picture showing the other? I thought, there we go.
Right there, on the current zoning.
So the property outlined in blue, shown as HB, is the applicant's property, correct?
Yes, sir.
And those property, the other property shown as HB, I guess to the south there, all along the public road, those are, in your opinion, are those similarly situated?
Yes, sir.
All right, assuming that this picture shows something else entirely, and assume that this picture does show that there is an unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstance that does apply to this property. Your office clearly thinks that it doesn't, but for the sake of argument, if it did, would the variance that the applicant has requested, would it be in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the provisions of the code?
No, it is in direct contradiction to the code's purpose to increase buffer sizes when commercial property and residential property adjoin.
Can the legal use of the land, as quoted from the code section, be accomplished without granting the variance?
Yes, the land is currently being used as a commercial business.
Is it your recommendation that the variance be denied?
Yes, I do not believe that the board has the jurisdiction to grant this variance because unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances do not exist, nor do I believe that the variance is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the provisions of the code.
Thank you.
Yes,
That
sir.
concludes our case. Ms. Joe? Yes.
When was the buffer policy or code created?
2005? I think it was
2005 when we
2005.
voted.
When was the property purchased by the current owners?
2011?
2001. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
You're welcome.
May I say something? I'm the landowner directly behind these people. We share a common property line. May I make a statement?
Well, we were gonna let Miss,
All right, fine.
let her, then,
I would like to do that though at some point.
that's fine.
All right.
Hold on 1 second, guys. I think I lost my connection. Oh, we're good. Okay. Okay, this is the Q Public website that her pictures and my aerials are taken from. This is the subject property. Please tell me it should. If it says Roku at any time, just let me know because it keeps timing out and I don't know how to fix it. So I apologize in advance for that. Okay. I'll blow it up some. This is our subject property. This is our rear abutting neighbor, Mr. Val Bernhardt. The variance request is for basically 150 feet for my building that will go right here. My rear property line takes up 200 feet of his 330 rear property line. His house is, how scary is that looking? I have some measurements here that show that his house here to the back of my property line is 170 feet. Looking at the back of David Schauss's is 265. Our other neighbor who was also given a letter there's an affidavit from in the packet that says that she also has no problem with it and would prefer a metal building be there versus gravel or a parking lot or anything else. Her view is at 200 feet to this corner here. This right here is Miss Judy Doherty's property. She submitted an email letter that I can go over in just a little bit stating that she does not want me to put the building there. I think she's kind of confused. Her letter makes it sound like she thinks if I don't get a variance, I don't get a building at all. Like it's just going to wipe the whole thing out, so therefore she won't see a building or have noise. I don't think she realizes that it just moves it by 25 feet. It's still going to be the same type of thing. But I can go through that and I have answers to all of her objections. Let's see. So one of the questions that I had, and excuse me because I was planning for Wes. Nothing personal, but that's what my questions and everything were targeted toward because that's who I've been working with on this for the last year. So some of it might not make sense in that respect, and I apologize for that. I just want to give you guys a little bit of a background, and I know although this is a new hearing and we're not taking into consideration our old background, I know we all remember what the old background is, so it's not like it just leaves our memory. But I'm Tina Chambers. This is my husband, Greg. My neighbor, Val. We have been in Pickens County for 30 years. We recently sold a big house out in Talking Rock that we've been paying pretty decent sized property taxes on for the last 25 years before that. We own 2 commercial properties in Pickens County. We operate 4 different businesses in the county, all under one parent company. And we have brought a lot of revenue into this, outside revenue into this county. Our renters who rent from us, our customers, our workers, our renters, customers, and workers all spend money at the local parts stores, the restaurants, the gas stations, the grocery stores, everything up here because they are coming from typically Cherokee County because there's nothing to rent in Cherokee County, so they're all starting to come up this way. So they work where we are and spend their money in our county. So I just want to make you guys aware that we're very invested in this county. We do want what is best for the county. In the past 12 years that we've owned and worked at this commercial location, we've provided jobs and growth in Pickens. Our business center is focused on the needs of small businesses. We fill a gap in the system. Businesses, we actually have a waiting list for where we are. Businesses that are too big to work from home, but too small to rent a big building, need someplace to be, so they come to us. We have amenities and make it really nice. We have a good network. We hardly have any turnover, which is why we have a waiting list. So again, that brings more job opportunities as they grow. We have a couple of businesses, Prodigy Boats, I don't know if you're familiar with them. They're up off of Chambers Street, ironically. They moved from Chambers Way to Chambers Street. But they started off in one of our smaller buildings and just grew and grew and grew and grew until they had to move, and they rented, and now they've bought a building up there and they're expanding. And there's a couple of other ones that have gone on to move out and grow, which is good. To clarify, I'm pretty much going to say I through this whole thing as if it's just me. It's not just me. It's obviously us and the people that we work with and everybody connected to this issue that wants to see this go through. So, several businesses, yes. It is nice to see you all again. However, different circumstances would have been better because I know this is not fun for any of us. I knew when I left the first hearing that I would be appealing. I didn't know the exact code number in the ordinances or case law or anything like that that was violated at the time, but I knew something was amiss and had gone wrong and that I would be appealing. There are no attorneys in town that want to take this on. Imagine that. So I had to do all of this pro se. We are very busy with our commercial properties, businesses, and this crazy life in general, and I had no intention of ever investing so much time and energy into learning the Pickens County Code of Ordinances, nor the in-depth procedure of writing a writ of certiorari to the Superior Court. It has been a long, sacrificial, stressful, expensive, exhausting 336 days since we last hung out. There's a lot to cover. I did my best to try to organize this in the most direct, concise, efficient way that I could. At some points that might feel like I'm bouncing back and forth, but that's because some situations hinge upon other situations, so they're going to kind of come up more than once. Bear with me. I think you'll see all the dots connected in the end. There are some things that you might think that I'm diving into too much detail or beating a dead horse, so to speak. This is twofold. Number one, I want to make sure that you guys have the full understanding of what this is about. And I also need to enter something onto the record, so to speak, like Phil had mentioned. So in case this goes any further, it's going to be part of the record that moves along with the case, so. There have been numerous discrepancies about procedure when it comes to the hearing and stuff that took place last time, which I want to let you guys know why we are back here today. I don't plan to play the 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 9 seconds of the 2 recorded hearings between my hearing and all of the similarities that happened in Mr. Tom Richardson's hearing in 2020, which I believe are the only 2 variance hearings that have been heard in the last 10 years that I could find with the board. If I'm wrong, please correct me. Those were the only 2 I could find. I don't plan on going over the 50-page petition verbatim, nor reviewing every other document that was previously presented, or reciting every email conversation. But if at any point you think that I'm wrong or pulling something out of context or lying or anything like that, stop me and I will pull whatever the backing evidence is, whether it's down there or on here or anywhere else. I will pull it and bring that to you to show you. But in the interest of saving time, I don't feel like I have to prove every single little point until one of you objects to something that I have to say. Let's see. Throughout this, the petition for writ of certiorari, I'm just going to call it the writ moving forward. What that is it's written in the code that that's what has to be done. You can't go to any other appeal. You can't go to the planning commission. You can't go to the board of the commissioners, anything else like a lot of the other appellate type processes in the county take place. It's sort of a 2-step process. I had to file a petition to the Superior Court that the judge reviews, and then if the judge finds that my petition has merit for appeal, then she says, okay, now you can go ahead and appeal. So it's sort of a, you kind of got to jump through that hoop as well to get to this point. With a granted writ, the judge has 3 different options of how she can handle that writ. She can either which the very first thing she does is she remands your record up to the higher court. You guys are considered to the lower court. She's the higher court. She remands your whole case document of whatever up to her. And you guys provided that to the judge. After she reviews mine and yours, she decides if she either wants to decide the case herself without having a hearing. She can remand it back to you guys to have a kind of a do-over, or she can hear the case herself and be the judge of it, and we all go to court and have that type of a hearing. So she's not under any kind of a law to confer with the plaintiff and the defendant, but she did have a conference with Phil and I because of the complexity of things, so that we could all kind of have our input and navigate and decide what we thought would be the best route for this type of a situation. And we all agreed that bringing it back to you guys again would be a fair and feasible option. So she signed an order for that. Phil, if I say anything, please interject if I'm not doing a good job of explaining anything. I did, in that conference, voice my opinion that obviously I knew I was going to be coming up against this same board. And like I said, you're not going to forget what happened last time. So I do understand that it's hard to not be tainted from what happened before, or to not be slighted or have your feelings hurt that I disagree with what you said last time. So that animosity that was there was part of my concern in the conference, and Phil assured me that it's all business and you guys understand that it's an appeal and it's nothing personal, it's just part of the process. So that brings us to today. And forgive me, I am a little thrown off by not having Wes here because I had questions along the way, so I'm kind of having to skip around. Let's see. Okay, as part of that process, once it came back to us here today,
Ms. Chambers, but your screen just went blank. I don't know if you need to
Roku? It's black.
It's
It's
black.
just
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay,
You're
is
good
it up?
now.
Okay.
You're good.
I guess I just need to wiggle this.
Every down now, yeah.
Okay.
Wake it up.
Thank you. As part of the process, we kind of did the whole thing over again, where I file an application, they send out the letters to the neighbors, they put the sign in front of my yard again, they did their investigation, I submitted my packet, they did their report, and here we are. So we've done all that up until this point. Part of what I filed with my application, and I want to say the application that I filed this time is verbatim my 4 answers as last time. I'm not trying to bring any other new answer to that situation. It is still my answers. But I did add that I would be, for today's hearing, adding in the hearing, the recorded hearing from last June, and possibly the recorded hearing from Mr. Richardson in October 2020, along with the affidavit from my neighbor, Amy Jones, who states, I received the letter last year from Pickens County Planning Department regarding the variance hearing that was scheduled for July 11th, 2022. I opted not to attend the hearing because I have no objection to the property owner behind me building a metal building 25 foot closer to their back property line than the Pickens County Code of Ordinances currently calls for. I would prefer a metal building as a solid fence-like visual barrier to the option of bushes and trees. The proposed metal building is a win for all of those affected by it being allowed to be built there. And I am submitting this as an affidavit in lieu of attending any other hearings on the matter. And she signed it and has her phone number there if anybody has any questions. I also entered in that Mr. Bernhardt had, prior to the previous hearing, or just after the last hearing, when there was some confusion on where my appeal would go, I was originally told that it was going to go to the commission. And so Mr. Bernhardt called the commission to say, well, I just want to let you know that I didn't go to the hearing because I didn't have a problem with it, but I just want to make sure that you guys knew that. And so he talked with Mr. Stansel for a while, and that all took place. So I put that in my package, and that he offered up, you can either call him or email him, or he would attend the hearing when the do-over came about. Mr. Bernhardt, you want to say something?
Yes. Regarding the rear property line, which we share, at the present time, when I look back there, and I'm speaking particularly of my property value now, when I look back there, I see vehicles parked. It's a storage area. If they build the building, and I understand the only way you build it is if you have adequate room, which means moving it closer,
Yes, sir.
it covers all of that up. And then I don't see anything back there but the back of the metal building. And I think that would probably enhance my property value significantly. So I'm in favor of it, of you granting an easement so that it could be moved closer to the property line. Quite frankly, it would be better if it was built on the property line, I think. But between my property that is grass and this property, rear property line, I guess there's probably 75 feet of woods. So there's no one that can ever go back there, and it's not developed or anything. So I'm in favor of you granting this if you would do so. Any questions?
Anybody have questions for Mr. Bernhardt?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. The 4 areas that you guys have to answer before you can say, as far as is it identical or not unusual. Ours is actually unusual compared to both sides of us. David's house, Jeff Dobson. I can show you,
Well, you're on
You're down with Roku now.
hello. It's a good thing we all have a sense of humor. This is ridiculous. I have the topo map from Pickens County. And as you can see right here, or do you see Roku?
This is Roku.
Yeah.
I work for Roku. I'm trying to get you guys on. No, I'm kidding. These are subliminal advertisements for Roku. Let's try this again. I wish I knew how to turn that timer thing off. Okay. My building up here is at 1,330 feet elevation. Mr. Bernhardt's house is at 1,330 feet elevation. My bottom lot is at 1,300. So there is a 30-foot drop from this level of my property down to this level of my property, and where you see these thin yellow lines here, this is my basic flat ground that I have to work with, which is what we've all seen now as my gravel parking lot. The topography for Mr. David Schaus next door is, his goes up at the side of my yard. So he's up here also at 1,330, but where he drops off and then he drops down to the 1,300, that is his buffer. He got lucky in that sense that all of his flat land for his property, he has like a little bit of a top tier and then a middle tier, but his middle tier is at 1,330 feet elevation. And then his 40-foot buffer that he's in compliance with, lucky him, is the drop off in the woods and everything that it takes to get down to the gully and the fence. So he has that ability and had that ability to have all of that flat land on his, if we were to divide it on 3 acres, 3 acres, 3 acres, similar to Dobson's. Jeff Dobson has the same. He has a little bit of a slope up at the driveway, and then his is all one level. He doesn't even have the tiered at that point because the land goes down at my property and then it goes up over towards Jeff Dobson's. There's actually like a hill on Camp Road. If you drive past it, you're going down the hill, and I'm the unlucky one that has the this and the this on my 3 acres. So the topo map shows that I don't have like properties to both sides of mine, and even if I were to put in some more trees, as if the thousands of trees that are there now, if we're talking 25 more feet by 150 feet more of trees, it's not going to make a difference for sound, for visual, for anything else. He's 30 feet higher than my bottom lot. No matter how far out I go with trees, it's not going to change. The Pickens County Code of Ordinances says that I have to plant trees that will at least get up to 6 feet tall. A 6 foot tall tree isn't going to do anything. So the first one is definitely met with topography and the surroundings. In order for me to use my commercial property, which I paid commercial price for, I have almost an acre down there that I can't do anything with because I have a 30-foot mountain on one side, a road that has to have somewhere to come down to get access to it, and by the time you do that, I'm in the buffer zone. So in that respect, in order to make the most of what we bought and paid for and want to grow, I need that 25 feet for a building and parking lot versus 25 more feet of trees that isn't going to benefit anybody or anything. If I were to plant more trees there, Miss Judy Doherty cannot, she's not going to be able to see anything any different. She will not notice whether I have those trees there or not. Did it come up?
No.
I'm sorry.
You're still on Roku.
This is really quite embarrassing. Remember that thing I said about I tried to make everything really efficient? Here we are. Okay, so while that's thinking about it, I'd like to ask you, Wes, sorry Bethany, since I did put this list in of what I would be adding to my application, which is the affidavit from Amy, what Mr. Bernhardt says, that he would be here, the granted order from the Superior Court for my petition, the 2 instances of the nopickens.com recordings. I put in there that I was going to show the email with Rodney Buckingham and the EPA, that when they visited that I didn't do anything wrong when I cleaned up my vegetation. That was a real sticking point in the last hearing, and my variance request went from a 25-foot variance of trees so that I could build a building to I was being attacked for what I did back in 2017, but I was under the direction of the county at the time. So my question, hang on one second. It's not connecting. I am so unorganized for as organized as I was. Find my ones that I printed right before I walked out the door. I just want to know, did you, and I don't know if you did the report or if Wes did the report, but did you take all of that new information into account when you denied the variance?
Yes, ma'am. I know Wes had the whole entire file and he went through it piece by piece.
Okay. I'm so sorry, guys. It was the last thing that I printed off. It should be stapled together. It was right next to this one. It's not in there. Okay, after the topography, can you tell me what the next one is that we're supposed to overcome? By chance.
Hardship.
Okay, it would definitely create a hardship for me. Unnecessary hardship, because there's really no benefit to having that 25 foot of trees to anybody at all, except possibly Mr. Bernhardt, if anyone at all cared. And he obviously stated that he would much rather have a solid, he was so funny. In my last hearing, which he watched the hearing on YouTube, I said that we were more than willing to, make the back of the building green, make it look like nature, make it the color of a tree, but it would be a nice solid back of a building. It would look like a fence. He requested we put it in tan. So I said, absolutely. I don't see that side of the building. He does. He would rather see it when in the winter when some of the leaves are off the trees. It's going to match the stalks of the trees, the tree trunks, so we're going to put it in tan, which makes perfect sense. The unnecessary hardship that it would cause is that it messes with where my leach lines are for my septic tank, and my driveway enters into the property, and the hillside that I have, and then the drainage ditch that I have on his end. It really narrows down my usable space. And I don't think that occupying 8,000 square feet of what is actually usable buildable space and making me tear up that usable buildable space and put in some more trees when he's even stated he's got 100 foot of trees. There's 355 feet of trees between me and Judy Doherty's house. There's 200 foot of trees between me and Amy Jones. My 2 side neighbors are both highway business, so that none of that even matters. So those are the only ones within a radius that could possibly care about it. And I can guarantee you that none of them knew if and when we ever took a tree down. Brings me back to my other point of the last hearing when I was attacked for that. The trees that I took out and the buffer that I destroyed, They were underbrush. I went back and if you look on the 2015 to 2018 slide, there were 3 trees kind of in that whole area. The rest of it was that scrubbly, thistly stuff that you can't walk through. So I didn't rip up some oxygen creating, beautiful, wanna hug a tree hugging type trees. I basically ripped up a bunch of nasty vegetation that wasn't doing anything as far as a buffer anyway. So I did not ruin a buffer. The fact that Rodney Buckingham was out there while we were doing it, and how Wes was concerned that I was doing something that I wasn't supposed to be doing. Even in the last hearing, he admitted that I did not have to pull a permit because I was less than an acre, so I was well within my rights. Rodney Buckingham had actually put a stop work order on me, which is how I met him, was he said I didn't get a land disturbance permit for my project. And he came out and we talked and we looked over that 30-foot wall, and I said, it's under an acre. I didn't think I needed one. He said, be right back. And he went to the office and he looked it up and he called me and he said, you're right, it is less than an acre. You don't need to have a permit. And I said, okay, great, thanks so much. He says, I'm going to go ahead and pull your stop work order. So obviously, Mr. Buckingham was paying attention to the laws and the rules and the buffers and everything else, or he wouldn't have thrown a stop work on me. But then as he kept coming out there, maybe he was just using common sense that it was kind of a moot point. He didn't tell me I needed to leave some of that scrubby stuff there and start right here. He watched the whole thing. The EPA was out there. They saw how we filled the retention pond in, how we piped it underground, how we put those swirly type things in, how it drains to the exact same place that it drained before, slows the water down. They were there because I didn't have to have a permit. There's none of this documented in the county. I'm not lying. I don't have any other way to prove that to you. But if we have to go to a hearing, I'll find him, and I don't know why he left or where he went. I will find him, and he can be a witness for you guys. But I did not do anything wrong back then, and I'm using my property for exactly what it's supposed to be used for now. I don't make any noise. Part of Judy's letter, and in fact, I'll just go ahead and, I think you have Judy's letter in your packet, but I'm just going to go ahead and dissect it a little bit. She says that she received the letter, that she meant to come to the hearing last year but couldn't, and she also did not email anything before or after that last year. She says that my original request last year pertained to me taking out a bunch of tall hardwoods within the 25-foot variance, and that is not what my variance was last year. Then she says that the trees had in fact already been removed along the back property line without permission. Okay, well, there were not trees removed, so I didn't do anything without permission, and I don't know where she got this information for her to be saying this. Then she says that she can already see metal buildings. Well, the 2 metal buildings, she's in a 30-foot hole now, so when she looks out above the trees and she sees our property and David Schaus's property, the 3 metal buildings they were already there in 2007 when she bought her house in 2010. So if she could see metal buildings, she could see them back then as well. And I'm sure back then the trees that are in between everybody now weren't as tall as they are today. So she says it's going to bring additional noise even closer to her home. Judy is on if we're standing on my property and we're looking at boughs, she is on my right-hand side neighbor, but there is another piece of property in between us before we get to hers. Her house, the closest I can make her draw a line from the closest part of her house to the closest part of my property is 355 feet. She says that the noise from the facility is already deafening at times, making it difficult to enjoy the solitude of my backyard or carry on a conversation when I entertain. Okay. I don't know what noise she's hearing. I wish she was here today so that I could ask her what it sounds like. because I have a feeling that whatever it is she's hearing, it's not coming from my property. And I don't know what it is. I'm not saying she's not hearing something, but deafening noise is definitely not. Is there deafening noise coming from my property? And he's only 170 feet from me. So I don't know where that came from either. She says that the most detrimental outcome of this request being granted would be to set a precedent that other commercial properties along Old Canton Road would want to build along their rear property lines as well. Okay. That does not set a precedence. If I were to be granted a variance today for mine, that does not set a precedence for anybody else to get a variance. A variance is a unique tool that's been given to you guys, which is basically why your board was formed, was so that this variance could take place, that is specific to each situation. So unless there is somebody else in the county who has a 30-foot drop-off with just under an acre, with a 75-foot set of trees, with another neighbor that's 30 feet up above, that all of this stuff that I'm telling you is why I should get, unless they have that exact same situation, there is no precedent. The property next to me is Kathy Freund and Associates. She has all of the highway frontage acreage that runs all along the back of Logan's Run from mine, where mine and Val's are, behind Judy Doherty and every other house all the way up to Whirly Crossroads is bordered with that land. Each one of those lots is identical all the way down the back of that property. The topo map on Miss Freund's property is identical all the way down that line. So, if, say Bob in the middle, Miss Freund files for a variance against Bob because a corner of a building she's trying to build is coming in into the buffer, and he's like, yeah, go ahead, I don't care. That could set a precedent because there are 7 other people that have the exact same situation that has. That is when a variance should be looked at really closely as far as being denied, because it's going to affect a ton of different people potentially. And just granting mine does not set a precedent for anything. So the fact that she thinks that if I do this, everybody else is going to do it is not a valid argument. There were policy and procedural errors in the last hearing that is part of what got us here today as far as a redo. Some of them seem insignificant to this issue at hand, but I am still over that piece of paper. I'm going to go on to the third one. Will not be materially detrimental and is in general harmony with the code. Okay, I got that covered too. The code, like she read, the buffers, I think we all understand what they're for. They're to protect him having residential property, being able to enjoy his residential property in a residential manner, not being next to some sort of a business that smells real bad or is deafening noise or anything like that. We get it. I agree with having buffers. The buffers are to minimize future potential conflicts between non-compatible land uses. Perfect. What potential conflict could possibly arise? I cannot foresee if and when Mr. Bernhardt sells his house, the next people would be in there and say, you know what? I just had 25-foot more trees way down there in that 30-foot hole. I'd be a lot happier. That is a long shot. So that there is no further detriment to the society on that one. The screening standards and stuff that are listed for these type 2 buffer requirements are less than what my building would offer. I'm going above and beyond with a building. I'm providing a big, nice, solid wall fence, clean, colored, everything else. He agrees that that's what he wants to see. Amy agrees that that's what she wants to see. So making me comply to the type 2 buffer requirements is like downgrading, in my opinion, in his opinion, and her opinion. And we're the ones that it affects. Another one of the discrepancies, not in our last hearing, but in the paperwork with the Code of Ordinances, there's a lot of stuff that goes back and forth between Chapter 38 and Chapter 67. Do I go by the commercial code? Do I go by the land intensity district? Do I use this one or do I use this one? And there are a lot of contradictions. One of the things that and I'll find it in here if y'all want me to, but one of the things that the Code of Ordinance says is that when there is a more intense code that needs to be followed, Chapter 67 overrules any other chapter in the Code of Ordinances, which would mean that it would knock 38 out of the park. Now, Wes listed 38,855 and 38,856 as two of the code violations that I'm doing. Those are very similar to some of the ones in 67, so it doesn't really matter that 67 wipes them out, but regardless, via code, those don't count. I'm not going up against those in my asking for my variance. The first time I filled out my application, I had put 2 little question marks on the which code am I going after. And I explained to Nicole at the time, I said, okay, I put something there, I didn't want to have a blank, because if there's any blanks, you're going to reject my application, but I just have to say, I don't know. I just know I'm supposed to say 40 feet, I only want to go 15, I want 25. I can't find it in the book. She said, Wes is out having surgery and the books are way too big to go through, we'll fill in the blank for you. Okay. She's the planning department. I was cool with that because she knew better than me, right? So when I got the application back, okay, the next violation that happened was I was supposed to get Wes's report prior to the hearing. Kind of that whole courtroom discovery thing, kind of got to know what you're going to have to go up against before you get in there so you don't get blindsided. I got blindsided because I did not get that. So that was another violation that was in the petition to the judge, was that one. And it hurt me pretty bad by not being able to be prepared. Him rattling off 3855, 855, 38, 856, 67, dash 10.3 all the way dash 10.5 and 67 I was like, holy crap, really? It's that bad? It sounded awful. It sounded like I wanted something absolutely terrible in this variance. He was wrong on all of them except 2. 38, 855, and 856 don't count for me. The other one that he brought up was landscape strips on my sides. We weren't talking about my sides, my side yards, landscape strips. It said landscape strips in the front of your property. We weren't talking about the front of my property and landscape strips. So that one was wrong.
Excuse me, I hate to interrupt.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to point out, this board does not have the authority or the jurisdiction to address violations of our code of ordinances. The only thing you can do is either grant or deny a request for a variance. So I just say that in hope to kind of speed it up maybe and do what you want to do, but I know they're planning on having a planning commission meeting here at 6. So. I gotcha. My point to that was not because I wanted you guys to be the judge of that. My point is the fact that my variance sounded so scary last time and that I was some big voracious violator of code, it was completely wrong. So when we say we want to start off on ground zero today, I really deserve to start off on ground zero today. The only code is the one that says 40-foot buffer. That's the only code I'm going up against. The fourth thing that you guys have to come to is this the minimum of a variance that would work for me? It is, and that's another thing that happened to me by not having what was going to be presented. I, in my own package, presented, hey, we can do Plan B.
I could move my building out here and I could drive around it and do it like this, but he had already in his presented something that knocked that out of the park too. So it kind of muddied the waters, and part of why I was denied was because the question was like, well, you know, if you got a plan B, let's just do plan B. Like, why not? You know, it just kind of seemed, okay. I didn't have that option at that point, but I didn't know I was up against having to protect myself from not having that option. I threw it out there and thought it was. Once he threw the buffer requirement in there and no, you're not going to be able to park behind it, so it didn't even give me that opportunity to drive around if I moved my building, and it gave me just a one-way slim line but with my 30-foot bank. It wasn't an option. So it actually really messed up what you guys heard as legit information from me even as presenting that. This is the minimum that I can do that would make putting all of the time and money into a metal building that are so expensive now, and concrete and everything else that it's going to take to do this, to move it or to make it smaller or do anything else is just not a feasible investment from an investment standpoint. And when you're throwing your money out there to try to make something, you know, we think this stuff out. And again, the 25 feet difference of trees. I do have different topography. The trees can't grow 50 feet up, which would and then start to make an impact on any surrounding neighbor. Oh, David Schaus sent in an email today. Let me address that. David, he's my neighbor too, facing this on the left. He has an RV storage facility. He says, even though I firmly believe in citizens being able to do as they want with their property, I have a few concerns regarding the variance request being sought for the property adjacent to mine on Chambers Way. Number one, he says, I believe a retention pond at the back of the property has been filled in recent years. Okay, we covered that. This is not buildable land. It is buildable land. We filled in the retention pond the way it needed to be filled in, and we rerouted the water the way it needed to be routed. The retention pond was originally designed to hold water from my property as well. David's a smart guy. He does this stuff all the time. I don't know why he thinks that my pond was supposed to hold his water. He didn't own that property when I bought my property. Mr. Smithwick did. I didn't find anything at the county that says his runoff has to come through my backyard and drop into my pond or anything like that. So I don't know where that came from. But as long as we have been there, his water's never come onto my property. It goes off the back of his 30-foot drop-off into that drainage ditch along the back, which I said last time is what made the ground all mushy and knocked my fence over. And Wes agreed that that's where the water must have been going. So it never has traveled on mine. So, and if it does, when he says in his next line he wants to build more buildings on his property that are properly zoned, which mine is properly zoned, it will change where his runoff is supposed to go because he was supposed to get to use my retention pond. It's not going to change anything because we put basically an underground retention pond. Again, I don't know that I was supposed to house all his water when he builds something anywhere. I don't mind because if that retention pond was designed for it back then, it's still designed for it right now. And if he wants to put some water over there, he can. It goes underground and goes to exactly where the retention pond told it to go. Again, the EPA was out there while we were doing it. Rodney Buckingham was watching us. We were told way back then that that retention pond was for during construction of when they did the top lot and all the grading for the bottom and made the middle lot. They also put in a septic tank that does the top lot and the middle lot and the bottom lot. So it was all sort of planned at the same time, which is why that was there, is what we were told. So I don't think David's going to have to worry about anything with his runoff or anything like that when it comes time for him to build more buildings. He'll be just fine. He can still run his water my way. I have a whole lot more to say. I don't want to have to say it. I know they have another meeting coming in here. I don't want to have to carry over into anything else. I feel like I'm really leaving a lot out. Do you guys have any questions?
Any questions for the county or Ms. Chambers?
I just want to confirm, when did you purchase the property?
2011.
2011.
We've been there 12 years. Oh, I did get, for the deafening noise, since I had never heard anybody complain about deafening noise or any noise, I did do an open records request with the marshal's office here in town, and they got back with me and said they have no record of anybody ever complaining about any noise from my place. I've never gotten a letter in the mail, I've never had a neighbor knock on my door, I've never had a phone, my phone number's 4 different places on my front fence. I've never had somebody call and say, hey, can y'all quiet it down up there? I've never had a complaint, so I asked the county if anybody has complained without me knowing. They have no record of anything, so there's that.
So, just one other question. I was not here when this was heard the first time.
Congratulations.
From the photos, and obviously this was discussed and caused some angst previously, so I'll
Yes.
try to make it brief. From the photos, it doesn't appear that you have any kind of effective buffer in the back. Is that?
It
Is
does
that
appear that way.
accurate?
No, there's 15 foot of where my gravel parking lot stops, but it isn't like another drop off. There's like another 15 feet to where the fence is between Val and I. And there is a 15-foot buffer there with trees and shrubs and stickers, and there are some hardwoods along that, in that section as well. But for there to be like a specific planted buffer, that's like a tree every 20 feet, no, there is not. That type of buffer. But there is a 15-foot buffer.
Do you feel like that kind of buffer was required, or did you feel like it wasn't required? I'm just curious.
It wasn't there when we bought the property, and I never really thought about it. I guess I would think about it if I had another, like a closer neighbor, or there was something down. It was just like yard, really, so I never really thought about it. But no, I don't think that anything else being even put down there would do it any good.
Were there buildings on the property at all when you bought it?
Yes, the main building on the middle level is there, and it's a 6,000 square foot building.
And then you've added one building since then?
I've added 2 buildings since then, all on that same one, little over an acre there. There's a smaller building across, and then like a horseshoe of buildings that we added.
This is not the first piece of commercial property you've ever bought based on?
No.
So you evaluated its use when you bought it?
Absolutely,
Thank you.
yes.
Mr. Chairman, excuse me, I need to go to the map here.
Sure,
The property in blue is yours, correct?
yes,
The one here, this is David Schauss's on this side.
yes.
Is his, I can't see lines, is his property go all the way through here, or is this
No.
the third
Wait.
one?
The third one is Jeff Dobson,
Okay, that's Dobson.
yes,
And this is the other property you were talking about that goes all the way up to Worley Crossing, correct?
yes, that's Kathy Freund's.
And sir, this would be your house directly
correct.
behind?
That's correct.
And the lady who sent you a letter was
Yeah, right there,
this one?
that one, yes,
Okay, so I mean, that is a good distance away, but and that is her house. Okay, I just wanted to get that straight while the map was up there.
thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, a couple of questions. The 15 feet, if the variance is granted, how would you use the 15 feet?
The 15 feet would still be a buffer. It would be trees and bushes and a fence. We're gonna put a new fence back there as well.
In closing, I would just like to say that this is not an application for a buffer between 2 sets of commercial property. It's not between Mr. Schaus and Ms. Chambers. This is between 2 different types of property. And that has specific issues or specific concerns to the commissioners when they enacted the code of ordinances. So I would argue that because this property is residential, that gives you a heightened sense of scrutiny that you need to apply. With regard to the argument of the lack of uniqueness, that is solely within your purview to determine. I think that her argument shows that her property is different. We all know that each piece of property is unique. But does it rise to the level of being unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary? That is something for you to determine. And unless you find that those characteristics exist on her property, you do not have the jurisdiction to grant a variance. Now, that concludes my statement. I don't know if it concludes your side.
It actually doesn't conclude my side, because I do feel like I've left some stuff out. I don't want to waste anybody's time, but I feel like I'm being pushed out of here now, so I don't know what else I'm supposed to say.
Well, the hearing's still going. It's up to you.
Can I ask one other question?
Yes.
Sorry. When you were discussing the letter from the lady whose property was not adjacent, you indicated that she had a misunderstanding because she thought that you were talking about whether you were going to build or not build, and you were going to build regardless. But in
Yes.
your later statements, you said that it was not economically feasible to build if you didn't get the variance. So which of those is correct?
Oh, yeah, okay, I hear what you're saying now. If I don't get the variance, I'm still gonna build, I'm gonna build on my top lot, I will still be building. There will still be some more things going on there. I'm not sure if
But
we will,
you would not build on the lower level.
I'm not sure at that point. Maybe I would build something smaller, I can't guarantee, I can't say that I would never build something down there, but I definitely wouldn't be able to build what's the most feasible and pertinent and desirable and fitting for that piece of property. It would still, if I built anything else, it would still waste some of my property in some way, shape, form, or fashion because of placement and trying to maneuver.
Thank you.
So I'm not saying I wouldn't build, but I'm saying it would hurt me. I can't even turn around. I can't even turn around.
So you can still build if you don't get the variance.
No, I can't. See, this is where it's getting confusing. I can't build what I desire to build, what is the most economical to build, the most investment-worthy, smart business, providing for what our other people need. I can't build that.
But
So
you could build.
I could build maybe a
You
couple
might
of
come up with something later on.
a couple of sheds or something like that, but it's not going to be business related. It's not going to be what I bought the property to do for. It's going to force me to put something else there that's not what I bought property to do for. And like he mentioned, when we looked at all 3 acres, we looked at all 3 acres. We looked at the septic system. We looked at everything that was there. So no, it takes that opportunity away from me. Yeah, I could build a shed. I mean, she might see that building. I don't know. I could build a couple of sheds, but that doesn't do me any good in my business sense and what I bought the property for.
But just, okay, so to follow up on that then, when you bought the property, you evaluated the whole 3 acres,
Yes.
and you were aware that there's a buffer requirement when you bought it.
I don't know that I was like aware of a buffer requirement. You know, like, I mean, I've bought houses before, but not necessarily been aware of specific things of the purchase. I'm aware of certain building codes and stuff. When I looked out there and it looked like it had already been kind of graded down, which you can see, well, I guess you can't see back when they were building that building, they had debris and stuff down there. They had already done some grading and stuff down there too. When you looked at it, you could see the trees and the brush and all the shrubbery and stuff, but there was flat land that you could visually see under it that looked like when you go by somebody who hasn't mowed their yard and their grass is really tall, you can look at it and say, if I were to just mow that, that's a lawn. That's what I was visually seeing. 30 feet up looking down was, that right there has a lot of potential.
So do you have a copy of the original plat?
I do. I have to find it in there though.
A plat, not the tax map, I'm talking about a plat.
Yeah, in fact, I think it's in the package that you guys have. I think Wes had that in his,
Here you go.
Mr. Chairman, if I can make a suggestion, if y'all want to, it might be advisable for y'all to, we can transfer this case to the upstairs conference room if you like, or the commissioner's room.
That's fine.
This place has already been noticed for the planning commission, so they can't really change.
Yeah, we could do that. We go upstairs.
I'm sorry.
That's all right, no problem.
I believe there was a question going to be asked. Were you going to ask a question, Ron?
Yeah, she provided me with a plat.
Okay.
What I was thinking was that there should have been, I would think, somewhere a set of covenants or something for this development that would pertain to any restrictions on any lot in the development, like, a setback, a buffer,
No.
but you had no
Do
covenants.
you know when this was built?
The building was built, I think, 3 years before we bought it. It had gone back to a bank and we bought it from a bank, so,
I was thinking that, I couldn't remember when that development was built.
and it's not, they're
originally.
just individual, like there's Jeff Dobson, it was Mike Smithwick, and then it was us. It's not like a commercial development all the way down the highway, so, no, I never received anything in a closing or anything like that that said that there was anything like that.
Do you have a copy of your deed?
In the vault, I do.
I was thinking there might be a deed restriction on that.
I don't think there is any kind of deed restriction. Why would you think that there would be a deed restriction?
Deed restrictions would pertain to anything that rides with the land, like an easement or a setback, buffer.
Well, I think the buffers and the setbacks are just countywide regardless of what's in your paperwork. I don't know, maybe I'm misinformed in that. I don't-
Covenants will have the ability to increase and will not decrease.
Right, so.
What now?
But any covenants would have the ability to increase the buffer requirement, but not decrease it.
Yeah.
Like the bare minimums, I think, would be the county standards, and then HOAs and those, they can add to that and go above and beyond, but at least the county standard is the bare minimum.
I was just wondering if that development, or when I say development, that property, that whole from Jeff Dobson all the way down, seemed like that was cleared back before county even implemented.
I think so. I think it was that area right there, those three.
Yeah.
Jeff Dobson's owned his since 2000.
Yeah.
And I think they kind of, all along there, kind of got done at the same time. I know that from Val's house and then Amy Jones, and then the next one down is Ray Stevens. I know originally Ray Stevens sold the property that was behind him next to Cheshire Heating and Air back then. So I know it's been commercial like that a long time. I found the paper that, I have internet service now. I can go into the,
Good man, thank you.
Oh, thank you, sir.
Wore that machine out, boy, I tell you what.
I got mine.
You got one?
Thank you.
Wow, thank you.
I have internet access, I have the Q Public website pulled up. I have the ability now to pull up any measurements that you guys want to see. I can show you the topo maps of the land if you want to see those now on here. Skipping the Roku issue, we can just go straight to the top and we'll be fine. So if there's any of those that you want to see, and I do have, I can probably just go down the line now and I will really try to speed this up. I'm so sorry that I didn't have it done by the time the commission came in.
You send that right there.
Okay. Cover the red border. Okay, so I think I've pretty much covered that. I was pretty much unprepared at the last hearing by not having the discovery. So I really didn't get to plead my case back then the way I should have been able to. It is 67-3.2 that says, in the legal status provisions of the code, that says conflicts with other laws whenever the regulations of this chapter require or impose more restrictive standards than are required in or under any other ordinance, the requirements of this chapter shall govern. Whenever the provisions of any other state or federal, then those take place. Then it says,
Let me just kind of cut to the chase. We're in agreement, tell me if I'm mistaken, but we're in agreement that a 40-foot buffer would apply in the situation regardless of the code section. Because it's commercial abutting residential, and what you're asking for is a 25-foot reduction.
right,
To where a 50 would become a 15-foot buffer.
where a 40-foot would become a 15-foot, and I would have a 25-foot difference, which is basically the width of the building that I want on a 30-foot building. So it's basically the exact size that my building would be.
And like we said downstairs, this board does not have the jurisdiction or the ability otherwise to address the violations of other code sections or anything of that nature.
Okay, I was just thinking that because it was on the application, it was giving them something that they could look at as a potential. I can't have it because it says it on the application.
Our county would waive that. I mean, that's, as far as, if she's pled the incorrect ordinance section, that's
Okay.
something we would waive.
All right.
Do I understand correctly that this is like a set of dominoes? We must get past the first question before any of the other information applies?
That is my argument, and that is what I believe, is that before you have jurisdiction to grant a variance, you must first determine, is the request for the variance because of something unique? And unique's not the word, whatever those three.
Unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary?
Yeah.
Yes.
And then, because that's basically our argument. If you have a set of similarly situated parcels of land, just because somebody wants to avoid or have the variance reduced, you don't have the jurisdiction to do it just because they want to. You must first find that there is a reason that has been established by the Board of Commissioners before they have given you the ability to step in and actually look at it. And we would argue that those circumstances don't exist here for this type of vote. And certainly, and the other part of that is because we are dealing with difference in land use classifications, that's the type of buffer that we're talking about here. That because of that, your scrutiny, your jurisdictional scrutiny should be high.
So what is it that the county sees is a problem with my building being where I'm proposing it be instead of trees? What is the problem with the county, that the county has with that they think is kind of?
The county, under the county's ordinances, they do not allow for a building to exist within the promulgated setbacks.
Okay, that brings us to the main point of all this. That right there is the very reason for a variance. That is why you are here. The ordinance says one thing, but what a variance says is you can vary from the ordinance in certain situations. So that was part of my problem with Wes's answers, and he didn't answer them any differently than he did last time. So if his answers didn't change from last time and he's got nothing else to give, but yet I was granted the reason to be back in front of you guys again, I don't understand what he's bringing to the table different that is supposed to sway you guys. It doesn't make sense to me. But that is the point of a variance. For for us to sit here and say, now, if the Board of Appeals was established in order to ensure that no deviations were ever taken from the Pickens County Code of Ordinances, that would be on point. The very essence of the Board of Appeals was established to provide a vehicle for variances, which is to go against the letter of the law and go with the spirit of the law. The overall law is still being upheld. Nobody's being hurt. Nobody's breaking a law that's going to be a detriment to anybody else. And that's what it's for. And I have all of that right here. So if that didn't do it for you, bear with me. I have a slide that says variance.
While she's looking for that, I believe that the commissioners only allow you to grant a variance when exceptional circumstances exist. For example, if you had 2 acres of property and 1¼ acre were submerged by a contiguous body of water, or they were sheer cliffs that were absolutely impossible to build upon, and no legal use had ever been made of this property. This will be property that is zoned commercial but cannot be used as commercial in any way because of the unique topography. Then, if that 1/4 acre that they have to build on is right up next to us, the line, then you could consider, well, they can't really, I mean, it's going to cost them $5 million for the grading, if it could ever be done, because of the unique topography. Because, and I would, like I said, downstairs, I would argue 30 feet gradient is not unique, certainly not in our area. That's within your purview, though, not mine.
It's not the 30-foot gradient that I'm saying is what's making my property unique. It's the fact that I have a 30-foot gradient before the rest of my usable land starts. I'm traversing my 30-foot gradient just fine with the vehicles and the stuff that we're using to get there. That's what's causing the problem. I didn't get that big long piece of flat land of acreage that Schaus or that Dobson got. Mine went like this and dropped off, and then it went like this. I should still be able to use this, but because it's at a different elevation than the rest of mine, I need to have a variance. I need to use the common sense portion of the law that says if she doesn't fit in this box, move the box. And that's technically, literally, legally, logically what a variance is. It says a grant of relief from the requirements, which means you no longer have to hold me to the requirements. You have the ability, you've been given, granted the ability to do this. Of this chapter, which permits construction in a manner otherwise prohibited, if we look at the law, it would be prohibited by this chapter, where specific enforcement would result in unnecessary hardship. It is an unnecessary hardship for me, a Pickens County resident, business owner, bringing all kinds of stuff to the county, to not be able to use the piece of land that I bought it for, that it was, appeared to be when we bought it. I mean, I've owned land in Cherokee County, we sold that, we moved up here and bought in Pickens County to bring our business up here. I get the buffers, I understand that there's a reason for all of that, but they just don't matter in this situation, and that is the whole reason your board was created.
You tell me that the buffer is down in the bottom.
Yes.
I didn't hear.
Buffer is in the.
The buffer? The buffer is in that next 15 feet where my gravel parking lot stops, the trees and the brush start, and it goes out like this, and then it kind of drops down a little bit, and then it goes into his yard and goes up to his house. I have 15 feet there still on my side that would still be trees and bushes and stuff like that before his 150 feet start.
40 foot would go from the line to that, and then go up 30 feet, and then go the rest of the way to make 40 feet.
No, from where my gravel parking lot is, at the end of the line, that's where my variance, where I'm asking for my variance to start, because if we start back here at the fence line basically is the 15-foot difference from my gravel line. If we start at the fence line and we come 40 feet out, the ordinance says I can't start building till right here.
Right.
There is no logical explanation
Now, from that point back.
from
where
here
it
to
drops
here
off, is
to
that the 15 foot?
stop me. There's no logical reason.
How far is it from where the 40 foot?
So
stops
there's,
at your
it's
gravel
15 feet to my
park?
parking
Let
lot,
me finish my question.
25 feet.
25 feet from where it stops now, back to where it drops off. That's my question. The question is, you're going up 40 feet into your gravel parking lot,
From the fence.
all right? And you said it drops off down there. How far, when it drops off, how far is it up to where your original stop, 40 feet stops? 25 feet, 15 feet, 30 feet?
Are you asking from where, so the fence to where the gravel parking lot is?
It's 15,
All
and
right.
my flat land starts right there.
So
And
how
it's-
wide
And
is
how
that
far is
fence
it up
lot?
there
That's
where
what-
that-
Then another 25 feet.
That's 25. And you
25
want that
feet.
25.
All
I-
you've got is 40 feet?
I have enough room for trucks to come in. The road kind of cuts to right that spot. If I have to move the building out that far, then the road would dead end into the back of the building, and I'd have to try to do all kinds
So
of.
what's the, from the back of the drop off, where
Mhm.
it drops off, to the
Mhm.
fence, what's that distance? I think that's what Greg was trying to get to, from
I
the,
want the opposite side.
you know, where it drops off from your main property, what's the distance from that point back to the, back to the fence?
15 feet.
No, there's gotta be 50, 60 feet at least from where it
Okay,
drops off.
I think I'm on the wrong page of what you guys are saying. Let me pull this up and we'll
He's
look
trying
at
to,
it.
he's trying to
Yeah.
reverse engineer how much space is really back there.
Yeah.
Of my whole lot, what's left.
Let me make this point regarding this line of questioning. If we want to increase the economic viability of every commercial lot in Pickens County, then the Board of Commissioners needs to eliminate buffers all across the board.
Right, I agree. I'm
And
just,
that's not what, that's why I'm making the argument that increased economic commercial viability, it does not justify a variance. The fact that that the property is zoned commercial and it can legally be used commercial, which it is enough to take away your jurisdictional powers, I think. Because after you reach the first step of, are there exceptional circumstances that are unique to this property that we don't find elsewhere? If you disagree with me and think that there are, then you've got to determine, in the fourth part of that, is this variance required to make the legal use of the property, and it's not. It can be used as a zone now, and it is being used as a zone now.
No, that piece is not.
The-
My
the
middle
tax
piece
parcel-
is being used for
I'm
what
talking
it should
about the
be.
tax parcel as a whole.
Talking about the-
And I'm also, let me,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
the way I understand it is, all of this other stuff is nice to know, but it doesn't apply unless we get past the first question.
Right.
So I'd like us to consider and vote on the first question.
I have information for your first question.
Would I,
Okay.
may I make a request?
Sure.
Would you go over that first question again, just to refresh our memory?
let me read it verbatim.
I've got the page if you want it.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There must be unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property that do not apply generally to other property in the same vicinity or use district, and such conditions are not the result of the owner's or occupant's own actions. Such conditions may include topography, unique natural conditions, surroundings of the subject property, or the size or peculiar shape of the lot.
Okay, so this is where we are. And this has been the problem of being able to grant a variance up until this point is, yes, the commission put in zones, and the zones are agricultural versus residential versus, and yeah, they stretch those buffers for a reason, and all of that makes sense. But at the end of the day, it doesn't say anywhere in the Code of Ordinances that says, if you are abutted residential to this, you may not ever have a variance. It specifically states, this is the table that the county is using, the buffer requirements, highway commercial, buffer 2 zone. This is what we're arguing about, is my abutment to a residential, and I have buffer 2 requirements. Okay, if you turn the page, it then specifically states what they want all of those buffers to be. We're still in this same buffers of BC, we're still in this same section. We're talking about the same thing still. We turn the page again, it's talking about what those trees would be if you do this buffer, blah, blah, blah. Then down here, it specifically says, Part F, variances.
Let me just cut to the chase. The county is not arguing that you cannot grant a variance if you have commercial property abutting residential property. My point, and obviously you can grant variances for many, many things, not just buffers. But what I'm talking about is when the Board of Commissioners establish our Code of Ordinances, and when they establish a system of buffers, they put an enhanced buffer when we had two different land use classifications abutting each other. And so I'm not saying that you are jurisdictionally prohibited from ever granting a variance for a buffer requirement when commercial abuts residential. What I'm saying is the county put increased thought and increased care and decided to increase those buffers based upon the actual purposes of buffers. And so if you do find that you have jurisdiction, if you do find that exceptional circumstances exist, when we get down to 3 and 4, you need to consider the fact that these are two unlike parcels, land use parcels adjoining each other, which is a different analysis if I'm in your shoes than it is commercial versus commercial, because of the difference in how those properties are used, which goes to the purposes of why we have buffers in the first place. But if you remember, Bethany testified as to why we have enhanced buffers when we have commercial abutting residential.
And I am not in disagreement why we have enhanced buffers between commercial and residential. But the fact of the matter is the variance specifically says below this, you have the right to do this if it is clearly demonstrated that the existing topography and or vegetation will achieve the purposes of this section. The existing topography and trees that are already there definitely take care of the fact that there's a buffer. These are a different set than the 4 that is in the application. This is the other set that I'm supposed to abide by, and I've got these covered too. So in theory, I'm doing all 7. And it's giving you permission right after stating that there's buffer 2 requirements, that you have the right to vary from them. So although they are more stringent, you're supposed to think, okay, maybe that means if I'm asking for a 40-foot buffer, you tell me no because I'm commercial to residential and that puts me on my property line, and that's kind of not fair. So if I were asking for a 40-foot buffer on a buffer 2 zone, yeah, but you still have the right to use common sense that a 25-foot buffer on a 200-foot piece of property, we're not talking about a commercial development. We're not talking about Kroger coming in to his backyard. We're not talking about the highway business that it could be. That's why there's a variance. It's all for relevance and perspective. I absolutely agree that 2 abutting, they should have different, agricultural to commercial and vice versa. But this county, I've watched all of the planning commissions, they will take 100 agricultural acres and rezone them for rural residential or commercial in a heartbeat. They don't even think twice about it. Okay, we've been doing that. 15 people a meeting, every meeting for the last however many times. We'll rezone something like crazy that affects bigger pieces of property, that affects massive more people. I'm talking about a variance. The entire reason your board was put into place, a variance from the law, from all of them, from the buffer 1 requirements, the buffer 2 requirements. It's perception of what you feel is an appropriate buffer to grant in each situation. Each situation is different. My highway business to rural residential, is completely different from another commercial to residential issue. My commercial that I'm running are quiet little storage buildings with little itty bitty tiny businesses running out of them. I'm not manufacturing anything, I'm not causing smoke, I'm not causing smell, I'm not causing problems. Mine is specific, it's different. I have a different layout from everybody around me. When we bought the property, it was set up in 3 stages. There was a top lot, a middle lot, and a bottom lot. I know they meant to build on that bottom lot because they installed a 3-way septic system in it that handles the top lot, the middle lot, and the bottom lot. They were planning on bathrooms being down there. Now I know for a fact people don't put bathrooms in their shed. If they're only allowed to build a shed down there and place a shed somewhere on the property, let's let them have a bathroom. They intended to build commercial down there even back when Jan Stevens approved this 3-tier septic system. So yeah, when I bought the property and I looked down in there and I looked at the flat land that I had available, which is less than an acre, I said, hey, I can build up here. I can build a reasonable sized building down there. I can't build as big as the one I have up here, but I don't need to build something so small that it wastes my land. It's set up for septic. I bought that when I bought it in my price. But I have another lot down there that's already set up with septic. That didn't come free. So to try and say that my highway business is so bad that it's going to infringe on rural residential and mess up the county's commission's 40-foot rule, that is the point of a variance. Not everybody fits into that box. I'm talking about 200 feet of Old Canton Road to a guy who's lived behind me for 12 years and says, I'm no problem, and please, let me look at a nice, tan, big, long metal building as a fence. If you read what the buffers are, you can also have a wall as a buffer. I could build a wall right there as a buffer. What do you think my building's gonna be? A wall. It still fits. But my wall is gonna be 15 feet tall, taller than any tree that I can put down. The buffer says tree 6 foot. I'm gonna put a 15-foot wall. He wants it, she wants it. It didn't fit in the box of what the commission, when they made this big rule, and no, I don't think they should strike the rule out for everybody. I don't think that would be smart at all. It's a smart rule. It doesn't fit every situation. Therefore, we have a variance committee. That is specifically your job, is to grant variances when something doesn't fit inside the big planning commission's box. Not everything in the county is going to. That's why the ordinance established the ability to do it, so that people like me don't get out of using what they bought. That's what it's for. It's to protect me. No, but we've got 2 zones but just that, like Mr. Bernhardt has a right to have his rural residential piece of property, he does. I have a right to have my highway business property. And yes, I'm using it for highway business, but I bought it for 3 layers of highway business. It's septic tank for 3 layers of highway business. The 40 feet that the commission put into place whenever they put it into place to cover the major grounds of people so nothing stupid happens out there, and it gives the county something to work with to keep the idiots from trying to bump something up somebody's butt out there on the property line. That's what it's for. It's not for me. If I was standing there back when they made that rule and I was like, well, what about this? They'd be like, all right, look, just go get yourself a variance on that one. I'm talking about the big picture. That's what this is. The Code of Ordinances is the big picture. The variances are the little incremental situations that happen along the way because not everything in the county fits in the big picture box. And that's me, a small business, trying to use her 3 acres that she bought and paid for. It's taken me 11 years to be able to build up, to be able to afford to do this. I shouldn't be roadblocked because what the ordinance is protecting, my rural residential neighbor, he wants it too. So the board of the big planning commissions is shooting me in the foot, is shooting my neighbor in the foot, is shooting Amy Jones in the foot, so that they can follow a rule that a rule is meant to be broken with a variance.
2 points about that. Number one, to your question about covenants. When you buy a piece of property, if you buy it subject to the covenants, it doesn't matter if somebody gave you a copy of those at your closing or not. The same thing when you buy a property in Pickens County, you buy them subject to our ordinances. It does not matter if you realize that a setback line attached to your property or not, it still does. The second point I would like to make is, once you grant this variance, it is not unique to Ms. Chambers. It is something that she can buy and sell with land. And that, to me, I think we've said pretty much all we need to say on it.
Well, to those 2 points, what was your first one again?
When you bought the property,
Yeah, when I brought the property,
you've testified that you did not realize that it had that setback.
no, that's not what I said. I didn't know specifically what all of everything was about it, but when I looked at the land, I saw what I had available to me. My common sense still tells me, and I'm sure my common sense told me back then, that there's a variance allowed too. So just as I could say that there's a buffer, boy, I should have known there was a buffer. Woof. Wish I'd have known there was a buffer. I could say, well, yeah, I probably knew there was a buffer, but I also knew there was a way to go around it with a variance, because it makes perfect sense to have a variance. So this board is not setting a precedence where now everybody's going to come in here and be like, I want a variance, and you guys are going to be like, oh crap, here's another variance. These are unique situations. The last one you guys had was in 2020, and the one before that was like 7 or 8 years. People don't come in here and do this every day. And people don't come in and fight for something for a year and go through this much paperwork and go through the Superior Court system and come back and go through this much paperwork again because it's something incidental and unimportant. This is my livelihood. And that's what this takes into account. Let the little guy be little, let him do what he needs to do. The big picture is keep corporate Walmart from stepping on Joe Blow's toes. I'm not stepping on anybody's toes here. And yes, absolutely it's going to convey with the property because it makes sense.
Could I say something?
Absolutely.
To use your words, usable, buildable space to describe your property. If there is a buffer requirement by the county, then that 1 acre is no longer usable, buildable space. And you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying.
Now, wait, just
Okay.
a minute, okay? So that means that anybody can come along after this and take a look at 20 acres and say, well, there's a 40-foot setback over there of a buffer that we can't use, but we use this case to justify it. And I know, you're setting a precedent here. You're opening a door that we probably shouldn't open.
Okay. To answer that, you said the same thing to Mr. Richardson back in 2020. That's what you guys are all afraid of. You never want to grant a variance because it's going to open a door, let the snakes out.
Who's Mr. Richardson?
He owned the property and you guys did the Mountain Act or whatever, and his neighbor put his propane tank on his land by an acre. And so he wanted that he wasn't going to change the Mountain Act, and but all he wanted to do is say, okay, this acre's his instead of mine. They weren't going to change the density. But you guys say the same thing. And he was in for two different hearings as well.
Hey, that was a whole different scenario.
It's a whole different scenario, but it's the same scenario because it's a unique situation that somebody applies for a variance for. This does not open the barn door for everybody to go say, oh, there's 20 acres, and I'll just go get a variance. No, all of the surrounding facts have to match up with that guy too for him to want to apply and get a variance. Just like I'm looking at a piece of property further up in the county and Georgia Power has an easement right through the middle of it with their power lines. Guess what? When I stand back and I look at that property, I'm not stupid. It's not like I'm going to go ahead and buy this property and then I'm going to tell Georgia Power they can't come through here and I'm going to try to get a waiver for an easement. No, that's carved in stone, guys. There's no wiggle room around that. I know when I go in there to buy it and I go to build on it, that's part of it and that's what I'm buying.
I understand what you're saying. We need to determine first thing is we need to determine whether we even qualified to do this. Because according to this first thing here, I'm not so sure we have the jurisdiction to do this,
You absolutely have the jurisdiction to do
not
this.
according to this first.
Yeah, according to the
Okay.
first one. You absolutely do.
That's your interpretation.
Absolutely is my interpretation, and I've studied the code of ordinances backwards and forwards. And that's why I'm saying, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I'm not trying to be bitchy. I'm trying to explain the fact that just because he keeps reiterating that there's a 40-foot buffer in an ordinance doesn't make it like, oh, okay, now you don't have jurisdiction. You still have jurisdiction. I've proven that you have jurisdiction. If this proves that you have jurisdiction, this is what gives you your job. I know you don't get paid for it. It's a thankless job in that respect. But that jurisdiction is what created why we're here. Otherwise, why would you guys have an appeals board? Why would I even be coming up here to say, hey, give me a variance, if it wasn't in here to say I could come get one? If we're trying to stop everybody from coming up to get a variance, why even have it in there that you could get one? That's the difference. It's in there for a reason. And it gives you jurisdiction. It tells you right here, you have the right to do this. Based on the fact that I'm not in the big box.
Mr. Chairman, my battery's gonna die. It's flashing 0 right now. This has to be recorded and it's gonna shut off and then I'll change the battery again.
I know everybody's tired. I know everybody wants to go home. I get it. Everybody's hungry. I guess part of what I can say to try to make you understand that you have jurisdiction for this, that there's cause and it's your job. It's what you're allowed to do. It's why you're here. The judge even saw fit to remand it back to you for jurisdiction. She saw something in it that said, hey guys, take another look at this. You have the right. I'm not trying to convince you of something that's not in writing.
I agree that we have the jurisdiction. I think what Ed was trying to, we have to get past the first question before all the other details make any difference.
Right, which is the jurisdiction issue.
So we have,
And we have jurisdiction.
well, no, it's not just the jurisdiction.
Okay.
It's the one that Bill read, which says there are unusual, exceptional, extraordinary circumstances, et cetera. We have to answer that question, but the answers to all the other questions are moot if that one's a no. So
Let me just say, the variances come before the Board of Appeals, but before the Board of Appeals can grant a variance, you must first determine that the property has those exceptional circumstances.
So that's answering that first question.
Right.
So that's, Mr. Chairman, back to what I said 30 minutes ago, I think we ought to consider the first question.
We can continue to discuss if you want to make a move or whatever.
Do you have any more information that you want to provide to us?
No, I'm wearing y'all out. I'll let you go.
In that case, Mr. Chairman, I move that we vote on question 1.
That there is, so exactly what is the question? Go ahead and specifically state the question that you.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we consider the first point, which was a requirement, which is the paragraph which reads, and I'm sorry, let me put on actual reading glasses. There are unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property that do not apply generally to other properties in the same vicinity or use district, and such conditions are not the result of the owner's or occupant's own actions. Such conditions may include topography, unique natural conditions, surroundings of the subject property, or the size or peculiar shape of the lot.
Okay.
My understanding is that we would have to vote that is a true statement before we could consider any of the others, so.
All right, so we have a move. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a move and a second. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor of this being an unusual, exceptional, extraordinary circumstance, please raise your hand.
Wait, let me clarify something for y'all. And I'm not putting words in Don's mouth or anything, so tell me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the motion that Don made is to deny the application because the first condition is not met. There are no unusual, exceptional, extraordinary circumstances applying to the case.
Is that the motion?
I think we need to vote on the what is there, so we could do it from either point. If we,
Whatever y'all want to do,
Yeah.
that's fine with me.
if we say that there are exceptional, then we would have to proceed. And if we say
Right.
there are none, then
But
He didn't state that in the motion that I understood.
I don't think he said it either way, he
Yeah.
just threw it out there as like a vote.
He just read it off the piece of paper there, didn't
And
he?
so where I'm going with this is, eventually, Bill has to sign an order that has findings in it. And I want to make sure before everybody gets out of here that
will you accept a friendly amendment to the motion then?
Yes.
My motion then is there are no unusual, just add the word no to the paragraph that's printed on the page.
So we have an amended amendment, to amend the amendment, to state there are no unusual, exceptional, or extraordinary circumstances. Second, we have a movement and a second, any discussion?
who's second?
Ron? Any discussion? All those in favor of Don's amended, motion, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. 4-0.
Okay, so now that you have found, you've made that finding that number one does not exist, you need to rule on whether or not the application is granted or not.
The application is what?
You need to rule on whether the application is granted or denied.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, based on that vote, I move that the application is not approved, or it's denied. Based on that, I would move that the application is denied.
We have a move, we'll hear a second. We have a move and a second to deny the application.
Who did the second?
Ron, second. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. 4-0.
Right, I'll prepare a written order showing that finding. I'll get a hold of it, and I'll circulate it to all of y'all. If y'all have an issue with it, you let me know your edits. Once I get it, no one has any edits, I'll get a hold of Bill, have him sign it, since the vote's already happened, and then I'll distribute it to land development and to you, and that will start your review time at that time.
You gonna send
Perfect,
it?
thank you.
I'll send the five board members a draft. And then I would like for each of y'all to respond to me and with your edits or that you have no edits. And once I receive those 5 responses, then I'll have Bill sign it, or make the edits or whatever we need to do. And then I will have, and then I'll distribute it. I'll file it with land development, give it to Ms. Chambers, and then we would go from there. And I'll let y'all know if there are any edits or anything like that. So, does that sound like a plan for everybody?
Sounds like a plan.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your service.
Thank you.